specialist interests. When you use when you do special interests, mainly to do with science and computers, maths, or anything like that, an Asperger syndrome person does these because he feels that he feels a lot relaxed doing something he particularly enjoys. This is also a compensation for the lack of social skills that neurotypicals take for granted and do essentially without thinking. My specialist interest is organic chemistry, which I do, and I can do that without thinking, really, because as soon as I've learned it, so as soon as I've learned it since I was 16, 17, was it, since 1983, I've been able to look and understand things which I haven't had access through the usual route, through the usual channels I learning through a teacher, but I've actually learned that through books, and therefore in chemistry I've got to learning up to a higher standard than my qualifications really are. When that's common in Asperger syndrome people, because when you do Asperger syndrome, in Asperger syndrome, people with it they tend to have a higher level of understanding in that chosen narrow field, and really high level of skill. And although we also have a real strong few interest in other areas. One of my other interests are history, and another skill of mine is people always say that I'm good at spelling long words and that. So, but I don't know really. It's just what people tend to say. And when I write anything on the computer, I don't use a spell check really. I tend to redo my spelling mistakes if I've made any. But I can. That also helps if you can spell, all the better. Especially if your interest is an academic subject which involves a lot of writing, such as the sciences, that involves a lot of writing. But with my subject of chemistry, that I use a lot of writing, and that also involves a lot of drawing out things, such as molecular structures and that, and how the atoms bond. I find that really quite easy. I've also taught myself how to interpret something called infrared spectra, which shows the functional groups of a molecule, and therefore helps you deduce therefore can help you deduce a molecular structure of the compound you're doing the spectrum of. I've been able to do that for over 20 years, because I've learned how to do that when I was working at ICI in 1984. I also went to college and done BTEC, National Certificate in Science, up to level 2. I couldn't actually complete that, as after working at ICI I needed to get a job, and I spent ages trying to get a job, and then I ended up with a little company called Creative Chemistry, which basically exploited me, and I ended up filling in bottles of KY jelly. They did allow me to go. The boss of that company did allow me to go to college to do the level 2, but after he didn't want to do, he let me go after 3 months or whatever, 3 months, because I was just being exploited in that, and it was really horrible. Asperphobic he was, and since then I haven't been able to get a job doing anything really, because the unfair system allowing not being fair. It just isn't fair on an Asperger syndrome if he's got to do these things called job interviews, really. Because a part of Asperger syndrome is if you can't understand body language and the necessary cues that an interviewer looks like when you're using your to use your Asperger syndrome in a job, then how are you going to get one in the first place? Which very often I was passed over mainly for neurotypicals, just because I had basically the gift of the gab and could do the necessary, even if their skills weren't as good as mine, or sometimes the other way around. But other people may find that, but just because I may not have been successful, there's quite a few people that are. But it seems that just really a lottery on that. People are different. What should happen with Asperger syndrome is that people should allow us to have a chance, or allow us to use our Asperger syndrome in what activity we find that we could do. Like that's why when I was applying for lab technician, chemist type jobs, that I could understand what I was doing, and I always thought I'd rather be let to try to do that rather than go through the rigmarole of the job interview, because I'm trying to understand the interviewer's body language, tones of voice, eye contact, and all that. It doesn't do me any good, because I've also got epilepsy, and it messed around with that for 17 years, for over 20 years. But it just wasn't an accessible way of getting into the employment in my own specific interest. But if you can use your Asperger syndrome, then all the better, because that using your specialist interest, whether it's science, whether it's maths, whether you're good on the computer, whether you're interested in etymology, it brings a whole lot of pleasure to you. And I find it's very. I really enjoy doing chemistry. I used to teach myself and spend half the night, and time used to go flying when I studied that. In 1986, we were writing down in the books, writing the molecular structures, how it was made, the products on how it's made, what equipment I used, what follow-up techniques I'd use, whether THC, whether infrared, understanding the limits of nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, or the orbital diagrams, whether I found all that very easy. I find when in an Asperger syndrome person, you can find things like that, and all the long words and all that, really easy. So it's what an Asperger syndrome person finds easy. That's what matters. And yeah, I'll have to leave on there.